Hello. Okay. Why? Her name is Little Moon. She finally told me. Little Moon. Hi, kitty. Okay, hi. Today I wanted to talk about a little bit about, I don't know, I'm in such a good mood. I don't know why. I really am, even though everything is so wild and crazy in the world right now. I feel this like huge amount of optimism and hope amidst it all, which is crazy. Maybe I'll talk about that in a little bit, but for now I wanted to talk about why. Hey, come here. Um, why I call myself a witch and what that means to me, and yeah. Um, so I've always been really interested in the esoteric. I remember being a little kid and seeing like my first book about crystals and like being like, whoa, shiny, and like the symbols of astrology always like really interested me, and reading books when I was a kid, novels of like, fairies and, pagan lore and all of that sort of stuff, and being really fascinated with it. So I think it's always been kind of in me. But then what kind of really drove it home that it's something that I needed to really understand for myself is, you know, I don't see it as much of a conversation here in Bali or in different places in the world, but in North America, the question of cultural appropriation is like a huge thing. And for almost 10 years now, I've been a yoga teacher, and I'm not Indian. I am a white, cisgendered woman who's teaching from a culture that's not my own. And I take that very seriously. And to really flesh all of that out, to really talk about what that means, and how I've navigated that within my own self, and would be a much longer conversation. But one of the things that I have done is to look at my own ancestry and look at the practices that were part of my ancestry, like before Christianity kind of came and like wiped out all of the pagan practices of my ancestors. Like what was there, what were people practicing, what did people believe? And part of my ancestry, I'm like a typical Canadian in that I'm many different things. My grandmother is different than my grandfather on both sides, so many different lineages, lots of different ancestry. But I have Irish and Scottish, and I have some Ukrainian in me, so lots of a pagan background, from the Slavic, from the Ukraine, all the way to the more Druid and Celtic from the British Isles. And so I've really dived into those practices. I've really tried to learn what my ancestors, what like the women of my great grandmother would have practiced and believed in. So that's part of the reason why I kind of dive into those things. And what I have found is such a rich, like deeply rich, beautiful world of meaning and depth, and yeah, it's been wonderful. There's so much like goddess worship, which is really much in alignment with the practices and lineage of yoga that I study. So lots of correlations there. I can talk about that a lot too, which I will, I think, more. Oh, my workshop. Yeah, I have a workshop coming up on, I'm calling it The Principles of Magic, just because I like the word. Again, I'm a sci-fi fantasy novel nerd, and understanding what magic is in terms of the context of yoga, as well as the pagan practices of my own ancestry, and kind of like weaving, not blending as in like the two of them, kind of mishmashing them together, but finding that they're really powerful and interesting ways that they actually, that there's correlation, that there's correspondence there, and you're speaking from that place and how you can actually use that in your life. And then also inviting you to find out who and what your ancestors were and what they believed in, and to understand that. Like, I bet you if you go back far enough, there was someone in your ancestry that thought that the moon and the sun and the stars were really beautiful and really powerful, and that you can learn to like listen to their wisdom. But yeah, being a witch. So going back into my own ancestry, that's been kind of part of it. And then also me as a woman, if you go back, even 100 years ago, a woman like me who was outspoken, you know, I danced to the sound of my own song. I don't beat anyone's fucking drum. I dance to the sound of my own song. I'm quite smart. You know, just that alone would have, either caused me to be burned at the stake, forced into an arranged marriage, or exiled, called a witch and exiled. And so kind of as a way of reclaiming this like word that has meant such terror or such horror or such a thing to be afraid of for my ancestries. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm a witch. I am powerful. I am beautiful. I am strong. I have, everything that I need as a human being is within me as a woman. I don't need anything else outside of myself in order to really hone in on that power. So to me, that's kind of what saying I am a witch kind of means, that I can hold on to my own magic. My own magic is mine and doesn't require anything else outside of myself. And also, as a witch, means that I get to choose. I get to choose love. I get to choose my own path. I get to claim my magic and my power. I'm not forced into anything. Yeah. And there's two myths that I find really powerful. So very typical of a woman to weave myth and story as a way of explaining things, but there's like the patriarchal version of a few stories, and there's the older version of the stories that I want to talk about a little bit that are like two of my favorites. One is that of Persephone. So for those of you who have heard the story of Persephone, so she is a Greek, it comes from a Greek myth, and she is the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of fertility and of the earth. You would pray to Demeter to have like a good harvest, and Persephone is her daughter. And so the myth goes that Hades, so the god of the underworld, kind of came to the overworld one day and saw Persephone sort of bathing or helping her mother, and fell in love with her. And he devised a plan, and he kidnapped Persephone, dragged her to the underworld, where essentially he raped her and forced her to be his wife. Demeter, obviously, super pissed off, goes down and battles it out with Hades, and then they come to this deal where for half the year, Persephone is Hades' wife down in the underworld. And for the other half of the year, she gets to go into the overworld and be the doting daughter of Demeter. Oh, that rhymes. The doting daughter of Demeter. In both of these examples, poor fucking Persephone, I don't want to be her. I want to be just some woman's daughter is just following her around. And I also don't want to be someone's, I don't want to be raped and forced to be someone's wife. No to either of those things. In both of those scenarios, Persephone is not her own person. She is not her own, it's not her own person. She has no choice. But actually the older version of the story, much older actually, is that Hades was not the lord of the underworld. The queen of the underworld was Hecate, much older. And Hecate is often depicted these days as this really evil, crone, dark, ugly, but that's not who she was originally. No, she was pure power. She was just fierce in her extreme power. Sure, she was terrifying to behold because holy fuck, you don't want to mess with this woman. But she was as exquisite and as beautiful as anything else, as a thunderstorm. She was as exquisite as a tsunami. Just to behold her was immense and terrifying, sure, but beautiful. So Hecate was the queen of the underworld, and Persephone, she chose to walk into the underworld. She chose every single day, to every single step by step by step, probably with a lot of fear, probably with a lot of trepidation, because to walk down those steps, to walk into the underworld, requires you to be willing to face your shadow, to face your death. But she chose to walk into the underworld to be the apprentice of the queen, the apprentice of the most powerful being in the universe. or one of the most powerful beings of the universe, so that she may come spring as a wise woman. So in this version of the story, which is much older than the whole kidnap and rape story, Persephone, the woman, as an apprentice, as a young woman, she chose to walk into the underworld to receive the wisdom that comes from facing shadow and facing darkness, to come and emerge and come spring as a wise woman. And the beauty of this is that this happens cyclically. That we don't just walk into our shadow, into the underworld once. We get to choose again and again to go down into the depths and receive more and more wisdom. And every time that we go through that spiral, every time we go through that cycle, we become more and more wise, more and more wise, more and more wise. And we can see this in our life, yeah? Like, we are again invited to take this initiation into our own depths. And the truth is that I believe both of these versions of the story are true. You know, like, no matter what, we have to walk into the underworld. No matter what, we have to face our shadow. We have to face the darkness. It's just a matter of whether we're going to be dragged by our hair by Hades, or we are going to willingly walk down into these depths so we can be an apprentice. Oh, and in the older version of the story, she does marry Hades, but because she falls in love with him when she's down there. So she chooses love. She chooses him. Not that she rejects love altogether, and it's not that she's forced into it, it's that she chooses love. But we as wise women, we don't have to choose between our power and love. We don't have to choose between that. That's a fucking lie. Actually, you get to have it all. We get to have it all. You can be both powerful and beautiful. You get to have love, and you get to have your craft. You get to step into your path as a woman, as well as getting to choose all the beautiful things, like maybe having a family, or not, or just like having lovers and having love and choosing the sweetness of what the fruit of what that life has to offer you. So all of that, like this or that, you can either be the witch or you get to be the wife. All of that is a fucking lie. You get to have it all. We get to have it all because we have choice. It's not just one or the other. All that black and white thinking is a result of the patriarchy, and I do believe the patriarchy has to fall. And what comes on the other side of the fall of the patriarchy isn't women being dominant. It's the idea that dominance has to be a thing at all. Dominance is a product of the patriarchy. That actually, when that falls, what comes is not hierarchy, at the fall of the hierarchy, what comes from that is actually connection and conversation, where we stand in a circle, not in a line where we're on top of one another. That we as women get to have conversations. That we as men and women get to have conversation. Where me and you and men and women and non-binary and trans and cisgendered and the entire spectrum of what gender is understood as fluid and not a binary, and there's no hierarchy, because fuck that. So yes, so that's part of what, for me, being a witch means, and being able to claim that is I get to have both my power and I get to be a woman. I get to choose love. I get to choose. I get to choose. So wonderful. And then the other myth that I wanted to kind of talk about today, which is another one of my favorites. It's kind of dear to my heart. So Black Lilith is an asteroid that you can look at in your astrology chart, and where she is kind of an interesting thing. She's right on my ascendant. So my ascendant is 21 degrees Taurus. Black Lilith is 21 degrees Taurus. She's right there, and I have Venus at 26 degrees Taurus. So I have both the dark feminine and the light feminine really close part of my ascendant. But both of them mean a lot to me. But the story of Lilith, I like her. She's awesome. So the story of Lilith. Okay, so the myth of Adam and Eve. Older story of the feminine is that God, out of the same breath, out of the same dust, breathed his breath and created Lilith and Adam. So Lilith and Adam, they are made equal. Lilith is not subordinate to Adam. They are made equal. And so the story goes that Lilith was kind of tired of just being fucked missionary style by Adam, kind of wanted to switch things up, be a bit more playful, be on top sometimes, kind of like choose some different positions. And Adam was all like, no, I just want to be the one that's dominant all the time. Lilith was not so stoked about that. And so she like left. She's like, this is bullshit. And so she left because she just didn't want to be dominated by Adam all the time. Adam was kind of bummed about this, goes to God and being like, hey, Liv left. I kind of want to like have my like, you know, sex buddy. And God sent his angels to talk to, I'm like making a parody of this by speaking it so like in such a funny language, but anyways, so God sends his angels to Lilith, like, hey, can you come back? And she's like, well, no, he wouldn't let me, like, you know, he didn't want to share power. He always wanted to be dominant. And so the story goes that Lilith was kind of demonized, excommunicated from Eden, and demonized for not letting Adam kind of dominate her all the time. And then God took ribs out of Adam and breathed life into that and made Eve, so the subordinate version of the feminine, to kind of appease Adam. And, you know, that she had no problem just being like fucked missionary all the time. It's totally cool. I should make a trigger warning for this video. Yeah, so talk about rape and being dominated sexually. But anyways, so here we have the story, right? Where was I on this? Oh yeah, so then Eve was created out of Adam's ribcage. I'm not making this up, by the way. This is like, go talk to like, this is, I'm not making this up. This is like legit old myths. Now in the Christian Bible, it's actually pretty excessive. If you go to more of the like I think it comes from more of the Jewish and the Kabbalah. So yes. Oh yeah, and then Lilith, it does come back into the story as the snake. That she comes back into Eden as the snake, trying to help to like, wake up Eve, wake up the feminine into understanding who she is and the power that she has, so she doesn't have to be dominant, that she is equal. So the more feminist version of the story goes, which we have noticed. I'm kind of a feminist. So in this, what do we do with this myth, and how can we use this in our own life? Well, I think it's really fascinating that we as women have two versions of the feminine that we get to choose from. So we have the like fierce feminine, and then we have a subordinate feminine that we get to choose which one we want to be. I think even more interesting in these times is that like Lilith, like the angry, so like rightfully so, Lilith is depicted as this like really angry demoness who wants to rage at the masculine all the time, and then we have Eve, who is the subordinate that wants to be mother, wife, and you know, take care of community and all of that, and that there's like this divide between the feminine right now of like one or the other. And we can rightfully see how that has played out in our culture. I think the work right now as the feminine is to like merge and to bring those two archetypes into like not to like do something like that, but more of like weave the two together and see where what new sort of archetype can emerge of that. What is a woman that is both powerful and also able to be an active part of community, that's not just forced to be like in the distance, often like off to the side. So I think that's really an interesting conversation to have right now. And then also interesting in the story, which I think is really kind of a poopy thing is actually that men are just as much of a victim in this as women. That men, the only thing that you get to be is Adam. The only thing that you get to be is the like, you know, dominating force of like oppression. Like, I feel more sorry for you, actually, that like your choice is to either try to be like your choice is like trying to be Eve, you know, trying to force yourself to be the like unhealthy feminine, or the like really patriarchal sort of like dominating, oppressive force of the masculine. Like, you don't have this sort of yin aspect to the masculine. So here we have, like, Lilith is the yang, and yin is the, Eve is the yin of the feminine, and then all you have is the yang. There is no yin aspect of the masculine. When I think that the work is to merge, or to like, not merge, but like reconcile the yin and yang aspect of the feminine, which is already whole in itself. Don't need anything else. Already whole. It's about integrating. And then we need a yin, or more passive or more soft version of the masculine, and then do the work to integrate that. I don't know what that looks like. I haven't really. I should write a story. I'm gonna write a story. We should write our own myth of like what this actually means to be whole. Both the yin and yang in the feminine already exists. You don't have to be the masculine in order to be the feminine. You already are whole, and vice versa. Yeah. So both of these myths are some of my favorites to kind of contemplate and see how they play out in myself and in our culture, and then kind of offering them to you to kind of contemplate and do your own research, and maybe comment or send me your own thoughts on, you know, maybe actually, like, I'm definitely like not doing these myths justice. I'm speaking about them very lightheartedly. These are ancient myths that are very powerful that we can kind of use, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. What is it to be a woman? What is it to be a powerful woman? What is it to be a powerful man right now? Because men, you are so powerful, and you don't have to diminish your own power, but it doesn't have to be dominant. Again, I think the end of the patriarchy is not that men have to give away their power. They just have to give up the idea that in order to be powerful means you have to be dominant, because that's wrong. It's a lie. That your power, I don't know, I'm not a man, so I'm not gonna tell you what that means, but yeah, interesting conversations. Yeah, okay, love you, bye.